Well, hello and welcome everyone to another session in the Solid Finances series. Our sponsors today, as always, are Montana State University Extension and North Dakota State University Extension. We've combined to bring this program to you at no cost. Our goal for today is to provide an unbiased resource to help you build skills and confidence in different areas of personal finance. We're also not trying to sell you anything. So just try to provide education so that you can make better consumer choices for yourself. If you have questions that you might have been embarrassed to ask in a more traditional class, we try to keep things anonymous here. So if you send a question in, we'll be happy to just simply respond that we've had a question come in, and then we read the question and we never say your name. So no one knows where that question came from. So please be open, send questions in, comments in. We'd love to hear from you today as we go along. We will ask for some interaction with you throughout the day, and the question and answer pod that I just mentioned is certainly one opportunity to do that. The other is that we're going to have some poll questions to say, find out a little about you, to find out a little bit about what topics you're interested in. So please vote on those. Again, it's anonymous, so we're not going to know who voted what. We're just going to see the group results in total. So we would encourage you to interact with us that way today if you can. Finally, just a reference to our website. We do have our upcoming schedule posted there. Also recordings for all of our past sessions, contact information for myself and Carrie Johnson. If you've got questions, something you need clarified, please go ahead and send those to us. The handouts for each session are also linked there as well under the title Resources, so they're linked by each recording, and the one for today is linked on the schedule still as well. Upcoming sessions, we do only have one session after today to finish out this school year of courses for Solid Finances, and that will be on March 25th. And for those of you that may have had the original schedule from October down, we did move this session, so you may not have originally had the March 25th marked on your calendars, but please mark it on your calendars if you haven't done that yet. 2 weeks from today will be our final session, and Marcia Goetting will be delivering that session as well. Marcia Goetting will also be our presenter today, as she was last week. So today's focus is going to be on legal and financial steps to take before the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. So with that, I will turn it over to Marcia.
All right. Thank you very much, Joel. And this is a very close to heart program for me because I think I developed this interest because of my mom. And so I learned there's a lot of legal and financial steps that you can take before you have an official diagnosis. That there is the period of time where you may have some suspicions, but you're not quite sure. But now, because we know a lot more about Alzheimer's, we can be prepared. And as Joel says, what we're going to do is some polls, and I call these teaching tools. And the other teaching tool that I like to utilize are my wildflowers, simply because they help connect me with some of the names and ideas of some things that I'll be sharing with you over this next hour. Now, I'd like to get a sense of where my audience resides, just so I have, if I'm looking at people, I kind of know and can have them raise their hands. And I figure that those of you that are here today have a very specific reason because of Alzheimer's. So I would like to find out if you know somebody with Alzheimer's disease. So give me a clue. What state is it that you live in so that I can have a sense? Am I talking Montanans or primarily other states? And if so, put the name of your state in the Q&A pod. And if I know anything specific about that state and some other laws, I'd be glad to mention that. So it looks like that we have a lot more individuals that are out of state. They're not from Montana or North Dakota. So I would give a special welcome to you. It's great to have you with us today. The second poll is, do you know someone who has Alzheimer's disease? And I said dementia, and I shouldn't have there. I should have said disease, because that is the preferred term, because there are many kinds of dementia, like Lewy bodies, etc. Okay, very interesting that we do have 70% that say yes, they know someone, and 30% that don't, and you're still attending this session. That's great because it means you have an interest in there. Just give us a review of some of the things that you may or may not know about Alzheimer's. It is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States. And the Alzheimer Association has just released their 2020 figures, and it's the same. It's the sixth leading cause of death. And now we're realizing that 1 in 3 older Americans dies with Alzheimer's or some other dementia. And Alzheimer's is the one that is the most prevalent. We've got about 70% of those who have some form of dementia, it happens to be Alzheimer's. And the sad thing is, out of the 10 leading causes of death that we have in the United States, Alzheimer's is the only disease that can't be prevented. We don't know how to do that yet. We hear a lot about brain games, slowing it down. There's been different medications tried at different times, and it doesn't really slow it down because once you stop that medication, you've really slid further than you thought you would have if you had that ability. And it can't be cured. So it's one of those out there that we really need to do some attention. And of course, the term you hear is research. We want to find a cure, and maybe one of us could be saved in the future. And also, every 66 seconds, someone is going to develop Alzheimer's. And ooh, isn't that a little bit scary? And it's a little scary for me, I must admit, because my grandfather had Alzheimer's. Now, in that day and age, we didn't call it Alzheimer's. We said grandpa was senile. So some of the same behaviors that I saw with my grandfather, I also saw with my mom. And so they're part of that 66 seconds. So this is a poll that would allow you to indicate multiple answers. So you may be a family caregiver, a concerned friend, educator. Feel free to mark as many of those that apply to you. Looks like the majority of us are a concerned relative. And that's great. The fact you're attending this, the fact that you want to learn some more information will help you be a better concerned relative with somebody with Alzheimer's. And I'm interested in how you anticipate using the materials. You've got the opportunity for self-knowledge, you're going to share. Maybe you're an extension and you're going to use that for an educational program. Okay, great. All of us want to learn more about it. That's super. And sharing with family and friends is important because, as I said, they know how to better be with someone with Alzheimer's. It really doesn't help to have friends or relatives that say, now, John really does know what's going on. He's just being hard to get along with today. The one word or the phrase we need to learn is, it's not John, it's the disease. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the items to observe. So remember I mentioned wildflowers, and I'm hoping maybe they would serve a trigger to help you remember some of the important points. Now, this is a steer's head, and I think once I say that, you can take a look at it and see, yes, it definitely is. Look at the eyes, look at the ears, the nose, and this is a flower that you will see in Yellowstone National Park in May. So what it tells me is I want to steer you towards the benefits of planning ahead for the 3Ds. And Alzheimer is going to lead to all of these: dependency, disability, and ultimately death. I also want to steer you towards ideas for initiating a conversation about the 3Ds with parents, family members, or others. And then my third objective is to steer you towards some of the legal and financial things that need to go on. And maybe this is the stage where I would say, we are in the process of developing a really fun, well, should I maybe not use the term fun, but a very interesting Mont guide, and I'll tell you more about that later. And my pine drop that you see here, that's actually just like a question mark, means ask questions as we go along. That's part of the benefit of this Adobe Connect program, that you do have the opportunity to ask questions in Q&A. So let's look at Objective 1 and some of these 3Ds. To introduce that, I'm going to share with you the Botswana heart plant. Now, I don't know what it is, but I found it a couple of years ago and I saw the heart on it. So I thought, well, I'll just call it the heart plant. And that means have a heart. It may be you that will initiate the conversation about Alzheimer's, because we have family members that either choose to ignore it or that are in denial. So a concerned friend or relative can just start that conversation, and I'll give you some ideas later about that. But the advantage that we can do in planning ahead is that we can avoid decision making in times of crisis. I mean, we may be able to deny that mom has Alzheimer's up until the time dad dies, and we realize that mom can no longer stay with herself. So that's a problem. And then these decisions that we make during a time of crisis may not be the best for everybody. Because believe me, once a family member has Alzheimer's, it affects all of us, the parents, the adult children, the grandchildren, and even the great-grandchildren. And by doing this planning, we can reduce some of that emotional and financial upheaval. All of a sudden, you have to put mom in a nursing home. And you discover that in Montana, the average monthly cost of nursing home care is over $6,000. And you realize that mom and dad simply do not have those kinds of funds. One of the other ideas, or the heartfelt benefits of planning ahead, is hopefully that you could reduce some of those disagreements among the brothers and sisters. Because, you have different things that you think mom or dad would want. And if you're not careful, you're making that decision in a time of crisis, and there's things that are said that can never be taken back. So have a heart. Let's plan ahead for some of those 3Ds of dependency, disability, and death. Now, this is a great flower. It's called an explorer's gentian. And that tells me that I want to explore having this conversation. I know it's a challenge. It's tough for everybody, but it's something that nowadays we can talk about it. In the old days, nobody said anything. And I know there's still people out there that don't want people to know that the husband has Alzheimer's. But why not? We have an opportunity to do some education. And rationally, we sometimes know this, but we know it's difficult to start that conversation. You just don't walk up to somebody and say, well, I've noticed you're forgetting everything, so obviously you have Alzheimer's. No, we don't want to do that. So I thought I would share with you some techniques that have been shared with me about how do you initiate the conversation to begin with. And one of those might be a friend or relative that is moving into a long-term care facility. Because then we could go to mom or dad and say, hey, had you heard that George down the road is going to be moved into Pioneer Manor? Now, if you reach the stage of George, would you want that to happen to you, or would you want to have home health care? And that can help get the conversation going. How about the hospitalization of a friend? Maybe they had a heart attack, a stroke, a cancer, or we just recently had a friend that had triple bypass surgery. And boy, that has really got some conversations going, because not necessarily Alzheimer's, but oh, if that happened to you, what would you want me to do? What are some things we need to be thinking about? Because if you put somebody in the hospital that has Alzheimer's, you cannot leave them. You can say, oh, yeah, there's a nurse. Well, yes, but the nurse is only there every now and then. And that person is going to try to get out of bed. They don't know where they are, and they're going to be stressed. So you need to plan to have a family member available that the person who has Alzheimer's can recognize and calm them down if necessary. And how about a friend? Maybe I hear this a lot over the coffee table when I'm out doing my programs and I go someplace to eat breakfast. And here's the coffee table of the guys. And I can hear these conversations where they're talking about, well, Bud died and he didn't have a will. And have you heard that kids are fighting? And well, okay, I always want to jump in the middle of the conversation and say, well, did he have payable on death designations, transfer on death registrations, and these other methods to avoid a will or primarily to avoid probate? And this one was kind of fun. I thought I would share with you. I did a program in Butte, Montana, a couple of years ago, and everybody calls Butte, America. And this is a community that I had not been in for a long period of time. But if you look at the audience there, you will see that when you have an extension estate planning meeting, what you've got is a lot of white hairs there. You typically don't have the younger generation. And what amazed me about this particular meeting is you'll see I've got two red arrows of people standing. I've got two other green arrows, and those people sat for that 2-hour presentation. Of course, I gave them a break after an hour. But the really interesting part to show the interest is we had more people in that room than the fire marshal would allow. So we had to turn back people. And that was amazing to me. I've never had to turn back people. But what I said is come back at 6 when I was finishing the meeting, and I'll do another meeting. And so that's what we did. So sometimes when you attend a meeting, you're going back home and you're sharing some of the information with other family members as to what needs to be done. Now, in Montana State University, we have an estate planning the basics packet. And I kind of kid people, but this idea was given to me by an individual who said she put it on the coffee table. She knew if she went to talk to her dad and offered this to him, that he would go kerhump and not pay any attention. So she just left it on the coffee table. Well, lo and behold, he did pick it up. And then he started asking questions about the content of the Mont Guides. Now, we in Montana call our fact sheets Mont Guides, but basically they're fact sheets on a wide variety of topics. Now, other states have very excellent information as well. Kansas State has a transition planning, and they offer 12 steps to keep the family farm going. And then we've got estate planning in North Dakota. They have why plan your estate, property ownership, wills. They've got a lot of the same topics that Montana does. And the University of Idaho, they have an Idaho guide for estate planning. They have a farm succession and estate planning course. And like many of the states, all of us have copied that Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate from Minnesota. So I'm curious, do you happen to belong to a book club? Well, I see that 77% of you don't, and only 22 do. But that's really a big deal in Bozeman, Montana. And my husband has been a member of a book club for 25 years. So I keep suggesting to him that every time he has the opportunity to pick the book, that he should explore our basics packet. And of course, he kind of sneers at me, but I promise I could come and be a guest speaker like they had for one, or I would autograph the books. Now, you can tell I'm being a little sarcastic here, but who knows? That might be something that would get the group and get others to talk about estate planning. Another thing that I did was make a legacy jar. At our website at Montana State University Extension, we have the top 10 estate planning actions. And what you can do is clip those, fold them up, stick them in a jar, and you can use this jar for gifts. Now, I know you're going to say, oh my gosh, I'm not going to give something like this on St. Patty's Day or for Valentine's Day. But I actually had one of the financial planners attend one of my meetings, and he decided to do one of these for each of his clients because he thought that might be a clever way to have them draw out an action they need to take once a week or once a month. So you could do the same thing. Another thing you could do is combine the jar and the packet and give it on different things, like a birthday, an anniversary, or just because I love you. Yeah, it's not the typical kind of gift that one would give, but it's got some really good information, and I know I'm biased. We also have another fact sheet that's called Talking with Aging Parents About Finances. And so that is a really good one to help you get the ball rolling. And it also then reminds the younger generation that want to have this talk with mom and dad, hey, if you haven't done your own estate planning, younger generation, how can you feel right in telling mom and dad they need to do it? That doesn't make sense. We've got to practice what we preach. Now, you may know somebody in your family that is really good at talking with your parents. And in my family, it was the youngest daughter. My sister and I were gone for 8 years when my sister was very little. And so she grew up almost like a single child. And when she had her baby, my dad went to the hospital because she was local. And so I knew if we were going to get mom and dad to do a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney, that it needed to be Deb that talked with them. So I focused my efforts on Deb rather than mom and dad because coming from me, I think sometimes I just sound too lecturous like a professor. So one of the things we could do is, like I mentioned, share your preferences. For example, I mentioned that yes, as a part of our planning, my husband and I had decided that we wanted to be cremated. Well, my goodness, when I shared that with my dad, he just about came unglued, and I couldn't understand why he was so opposed to us being cremated. Well, by sharing that information, I found out that in World War II, he was stationed in the Philippines and they had an airplane crash and burn. And he said he would never, ever forget the smell of bodies burning. So that was the story of why he did not want to have that happen to him. He wanted a burial. Now, this particular flower is called a penstemon, and now people are calling it a beard tongue. But I think if you look at that particular flower, you can see eyes, and to me, it looks like these penstemons are talking or singing. So, what I'd like for you to think about now, for those of you that know somebody with Alzheimer's, or perhaps others that have noticed some things, if you would share in the Q&A pod what you noticed with a friend or relative that may have had you think maybe they have it, uh, maybe they're deceased, but they were doing some strange things, or maybe now they're doing things. What might you think about that would indicate to you that they're in a cognitive impairment state? So I'm going to just give you a few seconds to think about that while I get some liquid. Write that in the Q&A, and then we'll go on. All right. While you're doing that, I'll just share some things that have been shared with me. In one situation, the daughter found that mom was writing excessive number of checks to charities. And when they went home, what they would discover is mom had slippers from this charity. She had pads, notepads from 15 different charities. And what was going on is this individual, every time she received a phone call or some mail wanting money, she would send it. She would write a check. Now, once the daughter found this out, then what she was able to do is get on that do not call list and try to help with that. And, it started working, but it finally got to the stage where they had to reroute the mail because mom would just do that every time one came. In another family, they found that one of the kids was getting loans from mom. And he wasn't telling anybody about it, of course. But when I say substantial, at that point, it was over $100,000 that mom had given this one kid, except she didn't remember that she had done that. Sometimes it's making large cash withdrawals from a checking or savings account. And when you try to say, well, I noticed you had a withdrawal here of $500, you're trying to figure out where it went. And you know that at the senior center, there's it's not that expensive. So they couldn't have spent $500 in a month for meals at the senior center. And then my mom, it was very obvious when she just threw her hands up and said, I just, I don't understand how to make this checkbook right. Now, she could write checks, but she couldn't understand how to reconcile it like she did in the old days. And then my friend shared that her mom just started not even opening the bills. She would just put them in a shoebox. And then if anybody'd ask about it, she would just say, I don't understand these at all. So Joel, did you have any additional ideas that were shared in the Q&A pod of things that people
Yeah, there were
noticed?
several. One said that someone drove to Wolf Point instead of Havre for an appointment. Another person shared that
Mhm.
someone was repeating the same stories over and over, or other information repeatedly. Someone else shared just greater forgetfulness, not remembering things that they had previously discussed with that person. And the last one was didn't remember significant recent events. For example, a family dinner party the day after she was confused as to why there were so many dishes in the dishwasher.
Ooh, those are all, yes, those are indicators. Now, we can't say exactly that that's it, but that's why we need to go to the doctor. And now there are these mental mini questionnaires that can be done to help arrive at that. I've been on the Alzheimer work group for the state of Montana now for about 4 years. And one of the things that's been shared and frustrating is that doctors hate to give the bad news that, oh, gee, we think that you're having signs of Alzheimer's. They don't want to upset the individual. But in doing that, it does not give that individual time to plan. Because in the early stages, I remember my mom, we could talk. There would still be these moments where, for example, we knew mom had the world famous boiled eggs that were made into what you call the eggs you cut in half. See, I'm getting Alzheimer's. But anyway, deviled eggs, that's what it is. And mom froze those before the family reunion. Well, mom always taught us you don't freeze eggs. And so that's when we went, oh my, oh my. Even the grandchildren were realizing it at that time. So my reflection for the Pinstaman is When we're going to share that mom forgot something, what we need to do is not blame mom. We need to take it from the perspective we realize there's something going on and we really need to have this checked out because it could be that it's medication. My gosh, I have a friend that's on 32 different medications. And when you have that many, you often have one that is not well with the others, and so you can have all kinds of problems. Now, this happens to be an owl clover, and it's one I really like, but I like it because it's an owl, and we usually think of an owl being wise. So I think it's better to ask now than regret it later on some of these issues. And what I'm going to do is assume here that families have talked a little bit about the possibility that maybe mom has Alzheimer's. So maybe this is the time we need to start looking. Have they got a long-term care policy? If so, what are the benefits, the limits, and location? And of course, this is exactly what I did with my dad because I knew that they had been paying long-term care insurance. So my dad responded this way. Well, you know what? Because your mother's polio came back, they canceled her policy. And so I decided if they don't want her, they don't want me. Oh, of course, I had a heart attack, but it was way after the fact when it had been done. And had I known, we would have certainly had some discussions about that. And then if they have any life insurance policy, we need to figure out where that is, the death benefit, cash value, and can you borrow on it if necessary. Where are the savings and investments held? I still remember the one gentleman in Montana that passed away, and he had 54 accounts scattered across Montana because he didn't think it was anybody else's business what he had. And that was his way of secrecy. How about a will? In the early stages of Alzheimer's, if they don't have a will, one is still available. They can still do it and sign it. But if we wait too long, nope, it's not going to fly. How about the title of the property? This is where we need to know, is it in joint tenancy with right of survivorship between mom and dad? That means when one dies, the other receives it. Or do mom and dad have as a tenancy in common? And as I do my programs across Montana, I discover about 67% have joint tenancies. Only 3% have had the tenancy in common. And tenancy in common is what we call an undivided one-half interest. So if you've got a house, you don't cut the house in half and say dad owns one half and mom owns one half. You own one half of the whole thing. And we've got a Mont Guide on property ownership. And how about a financial power of attorney? Does mom or dad? And see, we're probably going to talk first about the person that we suspect has Alzheimer's. We can also deal with the other parent or spouse later. And these are claret cups, and that reminds me that I want to clarify some things. With a power of attorney, you need to know if it's financial or health. I just had a call yesterday, and she's wanting to know why the health part is missing from this statutory form that we have in Montana. So we do have one. The principal is simply the person granting the power. The agent is the person that you're giving the power to. And we've got our Uniform Power of Attorney Act. Now, in some states, this is a part of the Uniform Probate Code. So if you are visiting us today from another state, you'll want to take a look at that. But the advantage of ours is we now have some safeguards in there where the agent signs and says, I realize that I am using this for the principal. In other words, I am not to use this to take a trip to Las Vegas. I am not to use this for myself to buy a new car. Whereas before, with general powers of attorneys, it was very difficult to get a county attorney to prosecute someone because it's a general power. They could do anything, even though you knew in your heart they were taking advantage. So we've got this information that's on the sheets, and it tells the agent their duties. It tells the potential liability if they cause any losses by their violating the law. So I was kind of glad to see that one come in. The other thing that we have is a statutory form. And in Montana, if we have a statutory form, which means it was actually included in the law, it means Extension can print that. We're not practicing law by having that. Now, if we were changing it, then yes, we would be. So in our state, we can help folks at least have a chance to look it over, even if they decide to have an attorney do it. One thing our power does as well is remind you that you need a successor agent. What if you have the original agent resign? The original agent could die in a car accident with mom and dad, and that original agent, let's say it's dad, dad could become incapacitated. I can't even talk. Incapacitated as well. That's what I get for using big words. It could be your agent is not qualified to serve or just says, thank you, but I don't want to do this. I don't want to be responsible. Now, we also need to think, how long does a power of attorney last? I have many people at my meetings that think they could use their power of attorney after mom passes away. No. Once the principal dies, or once the principal revokes the power of attorney, it's done. Now we have to have a personal representative appointed, and that could be the same person, but now they have to perform their duties under the guise of personal representative, not the agent. Now, advance directives. Many of our states have living wills. Montana decided to change the name, and now we have declarations. And many of our states also have providers' orders for life-sustaining treatment, and that's called a POLST. So those are additional documents that you can use to talk about health cares. And in Montana, we've been working on a health care power of attorney. We've been working with the State Bar of Montana and also the Alzheimer Work Group and the Healthcare Law Section. And it's done. It's at our communication services, and I look forward to having that available in the future online, because then you will be able to execute both a financial and healthcare power of attorney. Oh, I don't want to forget to tell you a few things. Well, that's what these are called, forget-me-nots, and they're very neat across Montana. So don't forget that as you're doing this early planning, mom or dad can have treasured personal property items. You know, maybe they're guns, tools, special dishes, collections, books. All of these kinds of things we have. And they may not have a financial value, but they could have an emotional value. And we need to get mom or dad in that early stage while they still remember these kinds of things. So what Montana has done is said you can have a separate listing of tangible personal property. Now, you have to then include that paragraph in the will. It says, I have a separate listing of tangible personal property. It doesn't do Grandma any good to have a list over here if there's not the weight of the law behind it. So the rest of you that have the Uniform Probate Code in your state may also have this particular statute. So in the separate listing, what you're going to do is list, like my Grandma Ray's opal ring, that was 100 years old. last year, and it was my grandma's engagement ring. And I don't know enough of the story even for me to be able to share it. But if you have something like that, share the story. This was an engagement ring that your grandpa gave me when we had dinner out at such and so. I even have a school bell that we found in the house when we went to sell it after my mom passed away. So I look at this school bell, I call over my sisters and I said, "Hey, where'd this come from?" Neither one of them knew. And we knew it wasn't in the house years ago because, our house wasn't that big. We practically knew everything there. But it has a scratch in the inside, and the year is scratched, 1881. Now, I share this at my meetings, and most of the people there feel it is a school bell. But wouldn't it have been great if Mom could have shared that story early on in her Alzheimer's? Because of her age group, they're all gone. There's nobody left that can tell us the story of the school bell. So you've got some stuff like that. We need to get that information. And you can help yourself. At one point, my mom could identify every photograph. So we started going through the boxes. And she had dated some at one phase of her life, and she wrote the names on the back. She even wrote the negative of the picture. But there were so many that we weren't able to get to. And so I was the one that had to go through them. And I felt awful throwing away all these photos. So the untold story of the bell, don't let that happen to you. And again, Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate is a fact sheet that we have in Montana, courtesy of Minnesota. So don't forget, have a separate listing of personal property, help your loved one that may have Alzheimer's, and just make sure that you coordinate your will with what's in your safe deposit box. You may have John's name on your safe deposit box, but in your separate listing, you've said the coin collection that's in the box goes to Sarah. Now, who's going to get that? Well, in Montana, we've got two conflicting laws. So think about that, if that's true in your family situation. Okay, is there a trust? This is a good question because you might have a family. We've got lots that have established living trusts, and find out what's in that trust if the parents are willing to share. And then, do we have a safe deposit box? Where is it? What are the contents? Whose name is on the box? And is there a joint person that can also open that box? And then we want to take a look at a will. Now, in Montana and other states that have the Uniform Probate Code, is a will has to be declared valid by the district court. In other words, you've got this will. Now, do we probate the will or not? Well, if we know that Mom has payable on death designations on her checking and savings accounts and CDs, that does not go through probate. And the will wouldn't control it anyway because it's a contract. Once you've done these beneficiary designations, it's a contract, but it's one that you can change while you're still alive. Okay, maybe we have a TOD, a transfer on death registration of our mutual funds, our stocks, and bonds. Well, the will's not going to control those either. And in Montana, we have a transfer on death deeds. And many of you that have the Uniform Probate Code have that as well. So what that means is you file a beneficiary deed for your home, your $6 million worth of acreage, whatever it is, and you file that with the clerk of the district, clerk or recorder, and that means whoever you named as the designated beneficiary receives it. So that doesn't have to go through probate. So you see, we've got a will as a backup, and that will might be important because you're saying you want everything that's in the residue of the estate, which is not the TOD, not the POD, not the transfer on death deed, but you had some other assets, and you want those to go into a testamentary trust. So the will would have a pour-over provision to do that. So that means, yep, we've got to probate the will, but only for the residue of the estate, not the rest of the items. In Montana, we also have the ability to control your remains. In other words, we have 4 methods. You can make a contract with the mortuary, a crematorium, things like that, and your desire in writing or with a video takes priority over your relatives. We had situations in Montana where, if you're the funeral director, you're between a rock and a hard place because you've got 2 kids that say cremation. You've got 2 other kids that say, no, 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 mom wouldn't have wanted that. Well, somebody maybe has mom's contract that says, I want to be cremated. So that is a way to give yourself control over that. And then there might be a funeral trust. You can never tell, so let's look through the paperwork and see what's there. And then you may have an individual that donates their body, particularly an Alzheimer person. We've actually got pictures of the brain now that we can compare an Alzheimer person with someone that has a natural brain. And I wish I'd have seen this years ago, because that really had an impact of having me think, oh, there was no way mom could remember some of those things. There's just these spaces and there's this goop. And the Alzheimer Association has those photographs, so you can see them at their website. Well, this is an observation from my lady slipper here, that I see that time has slipped away and it's about time to wrap it up. But I also want to give Joel the opportunity to ask me any further questions that may have come in.
Are there
questions?
Any, Joel? I'm going to start you with one, and then we'll do our evaluation, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up the others, because I know we've got several here. But we've got one that's, I think, a little more of a situational question. So I'll get you started on this, and then we'll switch to the evaluation screen. So an individual has power of attorney that they've established for both medical and for legal. Cognitive testing for this person confirms they have significant impairment, not specifically Alzheimer's or dementia. Now, this person is receiving small monthly distributions from an annuity, but her family doesn't know how the annuities work, and the individual who owns them is very secretive about this, and her insurance agent is also secretive about them on her behalf. And the agent says that power of attorney doesn't override her wishes unless you're also her guardian or conservatorship. And the family has questions like, can we use them for her care in her lifetime? Do they have a cash value on death? Are they forfeited? How would you suggest that they proceed?
Oh, this is an excellent example where somebody has taken action, and then we've got others that try to impede that action. So I guess the first question that I would have is, what type of power of attorney is it? And I'd also be wondering, is this Montana? So if you can let Joel know that, because I'll tell you kind of what Montana says. When the Power of Attorney Act was passed, one of the things is, if you use that power of attorney, let's say with the insurance agent, they have to give you a written reason why they're not willing to honor it. If you have a general power of attorney, you can do anything the individual could do. And I would call up that life insurance agent and explain to him that, or her, that, this is the power of attorney. It is a general, and I want to know about that annuity. And excuse me, if you don't do that, I am writing the company, and then we'll take it from there. But seriously, we need to know. Now, it could be that the power of attorney is a springing power of attorney. We don't know when it was done, but if it is one that springs into existence at the time, like for a while for me, I had a power of attorney that I said it springs into existence if I have two doctors diagnose me with Alzheimer's. So it means I have control until that point in time. Now, my co-author on our power of attorney, he's an attorney, and he didn't like that. But I'm comfortable with it because if I gave a general power of attorney, that means the person I give it to, like my hubby, he would be able to do anything. And I'm just not ready for him to do that. I still want to control my resources. Okay, it's a second marriage, so this explains why I have my resources and he has his resources, because we want his resources to go to his son. So we have reasons for that. So the person that asked the question, now I didn't tell you what an annuity is. The annuity is a contract that they have bought, and they put so much money in there. And then in exchange for that annuity, or for that money, what they're going to do is pay mom a certain amount of money per month. And it depends on what kind of annuity it is, whether it's going to last forever, 15 years or something like that. That's why you need to know what the contract says.
All right, Marcia, and we did get a clarification. This is a Montana resident, and they do have a general power of attorney.
Okay. I suggest I suggest that you contact that attorney and just explain what I have as a general power of appointment. And if you don't believe it, here's the copy, and I will expect to see a copy of that contract real soon. And if he doesn't respond, I think I have in the Mont Guide the number of days the company has to respond. I just can't imagine if you've got a general power that they can say no. Okay,
yeah,
any other
this one's
questions?
a little more narrowly focused. Do you know if Idaho uses the Uniform Probate Code?
You know, I don't. I know I did a program there several years ago, and my sense of memory says they do, just like Washington does, and North Dakota and South Dakota, even Wyoming. But it's still just Google that and put Idaho, and what it will do is if there is that in your code, it will bring that code right up.
All right, well, I'll give people another second or two here to bring questions in. And just two other quick reminders. We do have 43 additional Mont Guides that primarily Marcia is a lead author on about different topics within estate planning. So there's the website there, and they're also linked in the resources page as well. So that's a good resource for you to continue. Marcia, did you want to do this one here before I do the schedule?
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying, don't forget, we do have these Mont Guides, and in Montana, they're available at your extension office. So take advantage of that, and they're on the web as well. So look at your resource.
Perfect.
Sorry.
So we have another question that's come in, and that is, what resources do you suggest for the creation of trusts?
Oh boy, we have revocable living trust in the materials that we have. The Mont Guide that I'm working on is going to have some information about testamentary and living trusts. And although, we're not supposed to advertise any specific group, I would suggest that you Google trusts. And the first thing you're going to find out is almost everything is commercial. But it gives you a start in kind of understanding some of the legal language that's there. And for example, one book that I bought was from NOLO, and NOLO is NOLO Press. And the thing I like about that particular book is they explain the legal language. If you hear, for example, the term right of representation, that you want your trust to be distributed by right of representation or by per stirpes, well, what the heck does that mean? And so there's those definitions. And it's like, think of it writing a will. The only thing is it's something that's going to go on after you. And how do you want the trust to be used? Do you want it for health, education, support of the kids, etc.? So if any of you are out in the Sydney or Glendive area, I'm going to be in Glendive tomorrow doing a program starting at the courthouse at 11. And for Sydney, I'm going to be a part of the Mont DAC program. And so I invite you to attend those if you have the free time.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Marcia. Just a reminder to everyone, 2 weeks from today, Marcia will join us one more time to extend our discussions around kind of estate planning issues. And that last session will be Families and Legacies, Challenging Decisions. So if you didn't already mark your calendar, please mark your calendar for 2 weeks from today. Thank you again, Marcia, and I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much for the